Hello, everyone. Welcome to day 3 of the EOSC Future Open Days. Good to see a few of you already here. I'm thinking more people will join, but happy to see you back or see you for the first time. In the past 2 days, we already covered a very broad range of topics. We saw how EOSC can support researchers and European research, and how researchers in turn can support us in making the best EOSC we can through our project EOSC Future. We discussed how providers can onboard resources onto EOSC, how businesses and EOSC can collaborate, and how our project and the EOSC DIH are supporting businesses. And we also saw the impact EOSC Future will have on policy through the EOSC Observatory. Today, we're looking at different topics. We have 2 more sessions planned for today. The first one is on the EOSC Future working groups. And then afterwards, we'll have a half-an-hour break and we'll discuss the EOSC Future Knowledge Hub. For the first session, as I said, we're going to have a look at the EOSC Future Work Package 3 working groups. These are working groups that are looking at how the functional requirements from cross-community use cases can be compatible with the EOSC core. And here to present that to you is a team from our project led by Licia Florio, the Trust and Identity Manager at Géant. Before I hand the floor to her, a quick note on how we will be collecting questions. As we did in the previous day, we're doing that to Slido. So again, here are some ways you could join. We'll also post the link to the chat. So we'll collect questions there, and then after Licia has given the presentation, we'll have time enough for discussion and for further questions should you want to. So I'm going to hand over to Licia now. Enjoy the session, and thanks for being here for this early start again.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. Indeed, it's well, could be worse. It's not too early, and we are all comfortably at home, so we didn't have to leave our house, which is, you know, it has some good things sometimes. So let me share my screen. So let me start with this. And yes, can you see the screen?
Yes.
Yes, we can,
okay,
yeah.
Great, excellent. So today I will be talking very briefly about WP3, the architecture and interoperability framework, but the talk is not about the work package as such, but about the working groups and how these fit into the bigger picture, let's say. So I have asked also the conveners, some of the working groups to join me. So Alessia, Giuseppe, Keith, and Enol will be here. And of course, the most important thing is to get also some feedback from your side, inputs, and to have a bit of a discussion within the time that we have. So as I said, before we get into the working group, maybe it's good to understand why we have working groups in this work package and what was the original intent for the working groups. So very briefly, WP3 work package focuses on the architecture and interoperability framework. The architecture is kind of a given. It's if you look at the EOSC Future description of work, the technical annex, all other presentation and documents, you will find a picture that I will show very soon that will look very familiar. So that we had a good starting point with the architecture. So the interoperability framework is something that we are working on. And again, also there we had a good starting point because there was previous work done by the EOSC Secretariat and task forces within the working groups there. So the objectives for WP3 are really to continuously enhance the overarching federated EOSC architecture that's needed for the EOSC core and the EOSC capability and other services. And this should be driven by the cross-communities requirements within the project and of course outside the project. The project has a wide representation, but still there is stuff that happens outside. We want to liaise with the relevant stakeholders, again, in the project, the clustered infrastructure, research infrastructure, etc. But also there is work that is happening in other projects like the O7 project, RDA, Film4R, CoData, EOSC Association, etc. And those things have to come somehow align at some point. All this will be really a bottom-up process as much as possible. So it is important for people to provide requirements and to participate, but equally it is important for people to provide feedback. And we are really putting a lot of energy to present what we do. And very soon we will be pushing out a proposal for the interoperability framework, which is also deliverable, and we will start a consultation and a discussion with the wider community on that. So on one end, we have to keep to be, let's say, to follow a strict path because we have obligations. On the other end, though, we have to try and fit in requirements. And the working group, the supporting for working group was really foreseen at the moment we put together the technical annex for the EOSC Future, and in particular, the description of work for WP3. First, we were not sure whether working group will be continuing in the association, and we wanted also a way to collect inputs and in a more structured way from communities that is not strictly participating in EOSC Future project. And the idea is really to look at these cross-community use cases and basically to get a sense, is what we are doing good to support these use cases? Are we on the right path? As I said, you can see here the architecture, and I mean, it's a complex picture, but what is probably more relevant is that the WP3, as you can see, and the interoperability framework spans across different layers. Now, all these boxes, sub boxes here in the big green box are not all things that will be done within the EOSC Future project or within WP3. There are pre-existing groups and there is work happening everywhere. So the challenge here is to bring all this together and to come and to have a consolidated output. Some of the work will happen obviously within the project as well. So let's get back to the main purpose of this session this morning, the working group. There's been, I feel, I don't know, a little bit of confusion, maybe unnecessary confusion also about the working groups. So there are different activities that are part of the governance of WP3, and one of them is the overall management of the working groups. As I said, the working groups and the work that we are looking for is really complementary to what we have agreed with within the technical annex. So this is not a way to outsource and offload the work that WP3 should be doing to other groups, but is really to identify things that are missing and that require a larger interaction with other groups and to really focus on those. We did foresee at the very beginning a steering group, but then we realized there is no need to create yet another group because there is the TCB within the EOSC Future project. So the TCB has already the oversight of the overall technical work within the project. So it makes sense to also align the working groups, to fit the working groups under the steering group to make sure that the work is really informing the EOSC interoperability framework and the general key aspects of the work in WP3. And we, again, on one end, we need to get feedback. We need to bring the community together. On the other end, we are seeing a very probably common phenomena, and that is the fact that fragmentation is not very useful. There are only, although this is a big project, a lot of partners, the active participation is pretty limited, and we don't want to fragment groups too much. So we took already a decision at the beginning of the project to have max 5 working groups running at any given time, or to and see how they would work. We have defined a process. The working group starts with a charter, objectives, and every 6 months there is really a review to see what they have done, how good they are progressing, and if any of the output can be used by WP3. And the process also foresee the possibility to close a working group if we see that there is really not a lot happening for whatever reason. And then when we were putting together this framework, we started to look also at what was happening in the EOSC association, because of course, as I said, we don't need to duplicate work, but we need to align work, and I have something more about this. So how do we support the working groups? Well, we maintain this registry of working groups and task force. Also, we have links to the task forces in the association, just for if people want to see what happens, it's nice to have the big picture. We support the day-to-day running of the working groups. In what sense? We can we help the working groups to put information on the public wiki. We would like the information to be public and accessible to everybody, unless there are specific cases that would require a different approach. So meetings, notes, and all the like should be shared on the wiki. Of course, at the end, the working groups are responsible for their own work, but we will try to really ensure that we have meetings with them, and every 6 months there is this informal review to check how things are basically progressing. And you can see here that there is a link, so you can click there to get a sense of the work that is being done. We are updating the page as things mature. So, oops, sorry. So we had a call after the process was defined, because we wanted to have a fair process to make sure that everybody could apply for a working group, and this is also something important to know. Everybody can, if they have ideas that fit within the scope of the work that we do in WP3, everybody can apply, can send in a proposal for a working group. This will be reviewed, and they can get started. We don't have budget to support everybody that participates in working group. This will be very difficult, but we did park some budget to support the chairs, as we thought they will be doing some additional work, so it will be useful for them to get some additional budget for obviously, if the chairs belong to organizations that are not participating in the project, it will be difficult to allocate budget to external parties. So this is, but there is some possibility within the limits. So we got calls, we got proposals submitted, and you see here where we stand. The first two, the research product publishing framework working group, and this was really a community working group. Alessia is here, so she will say something about that. And we just reviewed the charter, provide some small comments to make things a little bit more clear. The group had the first kickoff, and you will hear more about the purpose. The science project and use cases took another approach. This was proposed by the TCB, some members of the TCB, to really gather together the clusters to look at some work that happens in the EOSC Future project, but also to use this as a forum to discuss general use cases with the clusters, basically. Then we have a proposal for a metadata working group, and Keith will be there, and the compute continue. Anol will be here also, and Anol is pretty much ready to start, and he will tell us more about that. And initially we had envisaged, we kind of thought when we put together the proposal for WP3, we looked at list of working groups that we may want to have, and there was one on AI, but we decided not to have that because the EOSC Association is running a task force of that, so there is no need to duplicate work there. So then there is one of the questions that everybody asks is what's the difference between the task forces in the association and the working groups? Well, first of all, let me tell you that as we stand now, I don't see a risk of people working so much in both groups. So there is absolutely no risk of duplications, really. However, we did build a process to prevent this from happening. We do have, we are in touch, obviously, with the association. We do know what happens, and there is also an FAQ that Sarah and I put together, I believe, maybe it was even in the summer, that explains the difference. So, but for everybody to know, but there are people from the association here, so please correct me if I don't represent things as they should be represented. So the task forces in the association are more forward-looking, and they are really there to provide frameworks and recommendations to inform the strategies in general. Those groups are also pretty exclusive. Participation is very controlled. For most of them, some of them are a bit more relaxed, but in general, they really try to have a very strict rule for participation in those working groups. The working groups in the EOSC Future are really focusing on requirements that we need right now to make sure that the work we have planned is still fit for purpose, will progress according to the needs of the communities. So you can see are really meant to steer the direction and to influence the work that we have planned in the project. And those are open. I mean, the idea is that everybody can participate, even to listen in and to contribute in whatever capacity they have. This is maybe just because I heard that also this was a topic of discussion in some other places. You may have heard that there are TCB working groups, but really this is maybe a little bit of an unfortunate name. In all projects, you have different work packages, and particularly in big projects, people work in silos because you have a lot of work, you have your call for the work package. Participation is open to other work packages, but as you know, it becomes a bit difficult for people to join all calls. So for specific topics that are really focused to the deployment and operational aspects across work packages, together with the TCB and the work package leaders, there are cross work package activities that are really scoped to address specific needs for topics and work that is taking place in a work package but can be useful and is required in another work package for advanced work. One of that, for instance, is the EOSC AI, just to give you an example where people have an understanding, because this is something that is required in different cases, and not all work packages should be working on that when there is dedicated effort in a specific work package for that. So those are very different, and we want to have this really internally focused and internal looking. There could be invited people if needed, but this is really a project instrument to align the work across the work packages that is also very much needed. And with this, I thank you. And if there are questions, I mean, I don't know how you want to do this. If you want to have some questions now or at the end, because I would like to hand over the microphone and the screen to Alessia and for the conveners of the working groups to tell you what's happening and hopefully to invite you to join.
There's no questions yet in Slido, so I think it will be good to take all questions at the end then. And just for everyone listening, a reminder again, the link to Slido is in the chat. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask them there.
So Alessia, over to you then.
Yes, Licia, so you will move the slides when I...
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so I'm very pleased today to present you the working group on research product publishing. I'm Alessia Bardi from the Italian National Research Council. I'm a computer scientist, I'm a researcher, and I'm the leader of one work package of OpenAir Nexus. You can go to the next slide. Okay, so let's start from who we are. The working group just started and is moderated by 3 co-chairs who are me, Jose Lopez, and Paulo Manghi. And the group is composed of 13 members from different projects and initiatives committed already to the implementation of the EOSC and also members of EOSC Futures. As you can see, we have members of horizontal infrastructures, but also from discipline-specific communities. And I hope that this list of logos can increase after this event and also during the lifetime of the working group. So, yes, thank you very much. The motivation for setting up this working group is that we believe there is a need of a bridge, the need for a bridge between research infrastructures and the scholarly communication ecosystem. Researchers perform their activities in the research infrastructures, they access and process data, they write and run software, they use tools and services offered by their research infrastructure. But this world is not directly connected to the scholarly communication ecosystem. So there is plenty of research products that are not shared because researchers focus on what they believe is important. So in most cases, this is limited to the narrative description of their research, the paper. In some cases, data sets and software. And in some cases, you may also find links between those different objects when they are related to the same research, but this is not yet the norm. And because researchers, although they recognize the importance of good quality metadata, usually they consider the time they spend at filling forms in the repositories to deposit their research products, they feel like it is time stolen to their research. So they do it as quickly as they can. And the help of librarians here is fundamental in this sense, because they really can help out, but they are not magicians. So only the researchers know the details of their research products. And the result is a low quality of the metadata. And in most cases, the deposited product loses its context, but the research infrastructures keep information about this context, the service that has been used, the software that was run, the input data, and much more. And all this information is lost when the research product is deposited outside of the research infrastructures. Some of the members of this working group already tried to address this issue by integrating the position API of repositories within the tools and services of research infrastructures. And we know that this comes at a cost because different repositories have different API, different formats, different models, different policies. So you cannot have one client working with different targets. And a similar reasoning applies the other way around. So if you want to allow your researchers to pick data that was deposited, for example, for reusing the data, for reanalyzing the data, you have to implement in the research infrastructure the specific API of the specific repository. Next slide, please. So this is where our work, no, too much. This is where our working group comes into the game. So we believe that the EOSC interoperability framework, and in particular to have a research product publishing framework, could serve as a bridge between the place where the research is performed, which is the research infrastructure, and where the research is published, the scholarly communication ecosystem. Next slide, please. Okay, so the working group is planned to last for 6 months, and our final output, the final output that we plan is to have a recommendation for a product publishing protocol, so API and formats and models that could be included in the EOSC interoperability framework. As I mentioned, we do not start from scratch and we do not want to invent anything. Therefore, we'll reach to the final output step by step by analyzing the experiences in this context, experiences from the members of the working group, but also what we can find in the literature and the lessons learned from the networks in which the participants of the working group are already involved. So we'll synthesize, we'll discuss all the challenges, the common patterns, the successful and also the approaches that failed. And this will serve as input to provide this recommendation. Next slide, please. The group is open, as Licia was saying, so you can join it at any stage, and we welcome new members from any discipline and background, from developers of repository platforms, managers of data services and research infrastructures, operators of virtual research environments for research communities. If you are interested and you want to participate, or simply if you just want to point us to some interesting practice or experience, you can visit the wiki page of the working group and you can get in touch. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alessia. I cannot really see the chat, so I see that Sarah posted the link to Slido. So
Yes.
yeah, perfect. I don't know, Giuseppe, are you here? Giuseppe, the clash. So if not, I will present. I don't see. He did send an email to me. Okay, I'll just do that. So as I said, this is a different type of working group because this came, let's say, more top down, if you will. It was pushed by the TCB, and the idea was really to have this alignment because one of the main drivers for EOSC Future as a whole is really to make sure that the clusters requirements are sufficiently understood and addressed, basically. So there are representatives from all the 5 science clusters: Embry, Fair, Escape, Life Science, PANOSC, and Shock. There are basically the working group, as I said, is now being moved to WP3, but it includes also representatives from other work packages where important topics for the science cluster are being discussed, like the onboarding of services, the AI, the monitoring, etc., best practices, profiles, and so on. And there are, of course, 07 representatives as well here. So what are the objectives? I mean, there is, for those of you that are more involved in the EOSC Future project, there is a dedicated work package that is chartered to execute some science projects that were defined at the start of the that are basically defined in the technical annex as well. But in addition to this, we felt this work is important, but is very much confined into this work package. But we still need to get requirements. For instance, for WP3, one of the first deliverables was really to get requirements to validate if what had changed over time. And getting in touch with science cluster was very useful, although we appreciate that we talk to representatives, the clusters are big, there are more communities, so we wanted also a way to somehow allow these communities within the clusters to have a voice as much as they feel like, of course. Keep science project informed about the technical development of the project. There are also some pilots that have been carried out. As I said, there is a specific work package for that, but it's also good for others outside the work package to get a sense of what's happening and what are the challenges and so on. And we are going to make use, as I said, of this community, this group also, to get more feedback on other things that are relevant for the future evolution of the architecture, as well as of the interoperability framework, the governance, the model, etc. So the methodology that was used for this was really to create some small support teams to oversee different areas. So there is one that, as I said, is really now pretty much assigned to a work package in the context of EOSC Future. So, and there will be reports for them. And there are really other small groups to look at the integration challenges and things that are relevant for everybody. And we had the first meeting in September, then things got very hectic. We had another meeting on Monday actually, and the next meeting will be, I do not remember, I don't think we will have a meeting in December because of Christmas. I think it's January, but I may be confused. So the expected output, you can see there are basically a number of things that are listed, and the idea is really to align this with the other work that is happening in the project about the high-level technical roadmap that the Commission has asked. And we are trying really basically to ensure that this group can provide inputs to some of the specific actions that are addressing the high-level technical roadmap. And I'm not going to get very much into details, but you can see basically some of the key things. The researcher can see services from the thematic clusters through EOSC. Researcher can see example of cases of complex workflow using multiple resource providers. They can access and use EOSC computing and storage resources, and so on. So those are things that should be pretty much familiar, and that there is basically the understanding is to have a discussion and on how we can then work on the technical aspect elsewhere in the project. So there are, and then you see, you can see it links also to work that happens in the project. One was, for instance, the science cases, the deliverable I just mentioned, where we are still looking for more input, obviously, beyond the deliverables. And then there are other deliverables that happen in other work packages about the back office requirement analysis, the front office requirement analysis, the registry of connection, integration, validation, and auditing processes, and in general, the EOSC service planning. So it has really a double fold purpose. One, to help the work, to steer the work across different work packages, and the other one to get the science community together to provide feedback as needed. And this was about the science cases working group. Now I hand over to Enol for the compute continuum working group. Enol, are you there? Yeah.
Yeah, hope you can hear me.
Hello, good
Okay.
morning.
So thank you very much, Licia. So I'm Enol Fernandez, working for EI Foundation, and I'm part of the, in this EOS context, I'm part of the EIS project. I'm leading a couple of work packages there, and I'm also involved in the C-Scale. Both of them are Infra EOS 07 projects. And from EIS, mostly we think that this compute continuum is a relevant activity for the whole EOSC, and that's why we are proposing this working group. So maybe you can go to the next slide. Yeah, so this kind of tried to give a bit the motivation of why we are proposing this. The first thing is that there are no good standards or no standards at all for accessing compute services. There are multiple technical implementations for delivering similar features. If you think, for example, in the cloud virtual machine kind of management things, you have things like OpenNebula, OpenStack, CloudStack. You have even AWS or any other commercials. All are delivering similar features, but all of them have different APIs. There are no easy, it's not so easy to move from one to another. And probably we will not be able to solve that, but it would be good at least to understand what each of the providers that we have available in EOS can deliver, so we can understand how to interact with them. It also happens that the current compute services, and this is a screenshot just took this morning from the EOS marketplace, the current compute services are not very clearly classified. So you have lots of things there like container management, Java execution, orchestration. And if you go into the details, you just read a vague description of the service. It's just a line saying, For example, this one, custom cloud and HPC solution for research. Okay, that's nice, but doesn't tell me anything about what's actually being delivered and how I can really interact with those resources. HPC is also not very clearly represented. So there are HPC providers here, and if you read into the description, you will see some HPC references. But again, it's not clear what that means or who is really delivering HPC or not. So that's another thing that's missing. There is also no criteria available for identifying which providers meet the needs of a given community. So if I am a community and I know I want to use some compute resources as the form of virtual machines, and I have clear specifications of what I need, going to the marketplace, the EOS marketplace is well, you need to go through all of the providers and read the description, and maybe not even the description, but you may also need to go and follow links and manuals and so on to really understand what's there. So it's really hard to take a decision on what the providers to engage with. Since we don't have this kind of well-defined specification of these providers, it's very hard to do any automation with that. So, for example, we can have a community that has some kind of orchestrator that is able to interact with different computing providers. But even if you have the possibility to interact with different implementations, you need to know which implementation. So we need some way to clearly identify and understand what each provider is delivering, so we can plug this into other services. And very similar, we cannot do any further integration, automatic further integration with EOSC core or between services. For example, if we knew what kind of interfaces a given provider delivers, we could do automated monitoring just by entering this into the catalog. We would be able to say, okay, this is interface type A, so I know how to monitor and I can just start it. Or we could do things like creation of bundles in the EOS marketplace. When you select a given provider, the EOS marketplace, by understanding which kind of provider it is, could offer you directly, for example, a storage provider that goes or works already with this computing resource. So you could have the storage and the computing somehow order or manage together when you try to access that. So that's kind of the landscape. We miss good specification for the compute services. That's main motivation. So if you go for the next slide. So given that we foresee these objectives, the first two are mainly understand and do a bit of landscaping of what's available in EOSC, and also understand what the use cases need. So the first two things that we will do in this working group is do a review and identification and classification of the use cases from the communities and from the technical implementations for accessing these computing resources. And we try to be as broad as possible, looking into the cloud, infrastructure as a service, containers, high throughput computing, high performance computing, potentially edge, although that's a bit to be seen, because edge is kind of very broad and can bring lots of different devices that may be hard to really tackle. But we will see as we go in the working group. And with all that information, we want to define some useful metadata schemas for those services. And those metadata schemas would be then plugged into the EOS resource profile to be able to describe them. And with that, we will be able to understand which are the interfaces and protocols to access the services. So we could enable programmatic access to them. And also we have a way to discover and to compare those services easily. Ideally, we should also be able to have a common way of reporting usage. Again, this is something we want to do. We will need to see as we go with work how far we can get there. And as part of this work, the providers that are part of the working group should also publish their compute services in the resource catalog of EOSC following this metadata schema. So as part of the working group, at the end, we should have already a group of providers delivering this information so people can start really making use of that. And we will also look into how to pair these compute resources with the storage, which is kind of the clear connection between these resources. Normally you compute some data, so you want to have some way of pairing those two things. So if you move on to the next slide, this is I don't know if you can see it very well. This is just taken from the charter of the working group. This is what we are planning to do. The main things are in bold, I would say. So it's a 6-month plan. By month 3, we want to have like a draft metadata schema for the computer service types, and then we will gather feedback and ideas to, at the end of the month 6, we'll have this final specification, and we will have the first providers already being ready to have their resources described according to this specification. Yeah, I don't think it's worth getting into more details, but the idea is that we have a draft at month 3, a final specification at month 6. So, and the last slide, I believe, if you move on. So this is the current status. So far, the proposal has been approved by WP3. We were asked to add some improvements. We already did that. And we were also asked to add more participants. So we had an initial list of 15 from EIA, Slifoch, Elixir, EOS Synergy, Cisco, Reliance, OpenAir, MSOC, MCCT System, and Clofero. But we are looking into more stakeholders for better representation, especially looking into the HPC area. We are in contact with several Euro HPC providers and are already discussing with them. But if you are interested, just ping me and we can talk to have this broad representation of the providers and have a really meaningful specification that is useful for everyone. And besides this, getting all the participants involved in the coming weeks, we will set up this wiki space similarly to what was presented by Alessia before. We will finalize the participant list and set up an initial meeting and kick off the activities. So I hope this is coming in, yeah, hopefully before the Christmas break. I think that was all from me.
Thank you, Anon.
All right, let's take some questions then.
Sorry, just there is one last one, Keith, if he's connected, just to give a little bit of an overview about the status of his proposal for a working group.
Thanks, Lucia.
Yeah, hi.
Yeah, I'm here. Thanks, Lucia, for the opportunity to do this. My name is Keith Jeffrey. I represent the ENVRI cluster, which is 26 RIs. But for example, one of the RIs, EPOS, has 250 asset suppliers, so it's a very highly distributed cluster. There's no slides because the working group isn't formally set up yet. So the reason for the working group is because we need much richer metadata than the current EOSC profiles, the catalogs, for discovery, contextualization, reuse, especially through orchestrated workflows deployed across our distributed network of RIs and asset suppliers across other clusters and, of course, EOSC. So the first and the third working group presentations emphasize metadata, and it was actually implied in the second presentation as well, so it's clearly important. So where are we? I have commitment from SHOC, as well, of course, as ENVRI. I've received interest, but inability to commit due to resource constraints from EOSC Life and PANOSC. The proposal was approved by TCB subject to modifications. Dan Broeder from SHOC, thanks Dan, joined me in getting the working group set up and making the modifications requested. So anyone interested, please contact Dan or me, and we will continue with trying to get the working group set up and approved formally by TCB. Thank you.
Keith, maybe if you want people to get in touch with you, can you post to the chat where they should do that and how they should do that?
Absolutely. I'll put my email address in the chat. Thank you.
Perfect. Then maybe if you stop sharing your screen, Licia, I'll show the questions because there's a few.
Thank you.
Here we go. Don't hesitate. So the link to join and a QR code to join is there. So don't hesitate to ask any extra questions. I think the one that I want to take first is the one on the timeline of the working groups. So when they are supposed to pay off and what month they're in now, whether they've just started.
Yes, actually, as you probably heard, the working group have pretty much started. The working group that Alessia presented had a kickoff on Monday, was that, Alessia? Or last week?
Yeah, no, it was Monday. Yes.
Gosh, it seems so long ago already. So yes, it was on Monday. The one that Enol presenting on the compute, they are planning for the kickoff, so they will start anytime soon. The science project, well, had a preliminary kickoff in September, but they are now really starting working. And the other one was Keith was saying, you see, Keith is asking for more support and participation to make sure that the work is can really take place. So we are really, I will say November is the month where we hope to have most of them really kick-starting, and therefore, so the 6 months start from then, just to give a sense.
Okay. So anyone wanting to join hasn't missed out on a lot yet. There's still time to join, be in from the start, and like have all the background knowledge. So I think if that was holding you back, whoever posted it, don't hesitate to join. We're really just getting started with these. Then another question that's there is one on Gaia X, and whether that interoperability with Gaia X will be included in any of the future working groups. I don't think I saw that anywhere, but maybe we missed that.
No, but actually this is a good question, and it gives me the opportunity, because so one of the proposals that we received as for a working group was from Gaia X, but the proposal included a number of items which not all of them fit under WP3. There was some technical assessment and comparison, which, by the way, one was done and published also on Zenode in the summer, I believe. Tiziana Ferrari was also involved there, so there is already some work done. But there was also some discussion on procurement and other things. So because of Gaia X, it's really, let's say it's a particular initiative, we thought that it wouldn't make really sense to have a working group only in WP3, but discussion is now taking place to include the EOSC Association, the EOSC Future and Gaia X, to understand how we can carry out this conversation. I want to note also that there is also a little bit of difference in terms of maturity of the architecture. Gaia X has started, let's say, but they are not in a rollout phase. They are still deploying, etc., but they are really at a different maturity level. We are aware that there are some substantial differences between the architectures, because they use, for instance, sovereign identities, etc. We use a federated model, which both models bring different aspects, challenges also. So it is something that we should discuss, and we should have this regular conversation with Gaia X to inform each other, and this is the plan. But we didn't think that a working group at this point in time only on that would be useful.
Yeah, I think it does. It seems like a big thing to chew on in a working group. Yes, the working groups, I think, are more targeted to specific issues and trying to solve those, where interoperability with Gaia X, I would not want to be in that working group. I think it's a full-time job. So yes, I think it's not that we don't think it's important or interesting, but I don't really think, as Licia said, that it would work here. Then a new question.
And also, if you allow me to say just another thing, as you said, it's a big topic, and we have also a work plan to execute with scrutiny and etc. And we didn't want to sidetrack from that. But there is a discussion that involves all parties, and We had a meeting actually 10 days ago to really discuss how we want to continue this collaboration, but it should be really at a higher level. So at the moment it's Gaia X, the association, and Future. Yeah, thank you.
And then someone has just asked whether there's an overview of the working groups on the EOSC Future webpage to go back and forth within our networks. There will be, as soon as there's new ones still joining, that's work for next week or the week after, but then there will be. We're just thinking of how to visualize them there.
Yeah, but actually there is I'm really trying to push everything on the public wiki. No, I don't want to have anything, I want to have very limited things on the private wiki, and the working groups are there. I'm in the process to upload the others, so by the end of this week we will have most of the charters there, notes, etc. So and I think Sarah posted just now a link into the chat for that, so you can start from there certainly, and I will put also email addresses in the slide so people can find and get in touch with us.
Yeah, so all the information is already available. That's really not the issue. There's a wiki of the working groups, but yes, it should also be on the EOSC Future webpage so that we can centralize the navigation to it, and that's work that's ongoing. And then a few new questions came in, I think. First, will users be able to use clusters or supercomputers directly from the EOS catalog, so run their HPC jobs directly via the EOS portal? Don't know whether you're the right person to ask, Licia, but I'm going to do that anyway.
I don't know indeed if I'm the right person to ask about that. So the discussion that is ongoing right now, and I hope that there are more qualified colleagues here to correct and add anything that I am not saying. So we are aware that communities, whether it's supercomputer clusters, they have their own catalogs already, and those are working for that community. So discussion is how we can make these catalogs discoverable, findable, searchable, also via the EOSC portal. And there is discussion ongoing about this. Paolo and Bartosz, I believe they presented yesterday, that there is really working to this end. How can we make this catalog searchable and findable? We don't want to create an Uber catalog at the end. The aim is not to have a centralized catalog, but we need to find a way for people from whatever entry point to be able to find all the other catalogs.
Yeah, so I think
this answered the questions, but
yeah, I think they were asking specifically for a high process computing job via the EOSC portal. I don't know whether we have anyone here from the consortium that can give a better answer to that.
If I can jump in, this is an old.
Absolutely.
So this is somehow related to the Compute Continuum working group that we are proposing and are about to start. And in principle, with this specification that we will deliver, we will be able to also describe the HPC resources. The thing on making it, and I think the other question that is coming there, that making that directly available from the portal is not that straightforward, mostly because normally there is an order and an evaluation of the orders for accessing these resources that will not be part of this Compute Continuum working group. So yeah, we can somehow be before you run the jobs and after you get so before you will need to discover that the working group will help. The order will happen somehow outside of this working group. We will not get into that. And once the order is approved, we would be able to provide some automation. I don't know up to what level, if to directly via the EOS portal, that may be too much, but some level of automation will be possible for sure.
There's another question on computing that I will also field to you then. That's will the EOS catalog only serve for information to users on what exists? So will they need to apply for computing hours on these clusters of supercomputers?
Yeah, I mean, the access is normally not automatically granted for this kind of resources. So yeah. I don't think we can just avoid the applying for computing hours, but that will be there probably in most of the cases.
Yeah,
But,
I think.
but this is more a business, say, question. And what I mean, there is discussion between those clusters about the business model to allocate these things. And I mean, it's a complex space, obviously, but yeah, they are aware that the application is what it is, and hopefully that there will be more flexible ways to do that in the future. But it is really a facility policy how things are done.
Yeah, I think if I understand correctly, that what EOSC will facilitate is that you'll have an overview of different options and of different ways of going about computing that is centralized. So you'll have the overview in one point and maybe help you make a decision on what is a right fit for you. But as I think people have pointed out, really centralizing all of that will be difficult because our model is a very decentralized one. So we're giving a centralized overview, but all of the resources and the computing power usually stays elsewhere, right?
Yeah, unless at some point there is the possibility to have in EOSC this type of resources, but that brings other challenges.
Yes, it does. I think then there's no further questions. A question that I wanted to ask, because there's people here now, and this might be a good time to ask them, is you mentioned that you're still looking for proposals for working groups, but also people to join the current working groups. Are there any specific types of people that current working groups are struggling to find or are really hoping to get in touch with? Because then maybe the people that are attending today can help.
Yeah, actually, at this point in time, probably we are not so much looking for new working groups, unless there is something obvious that we have missed and we want to hear that. Oh, absolutely. But we are really looking for volunteers and motivated people that can join and work. Yes, it is difficult because everybody is oversubscribed, but we do need at least people that can provide feedback and input and because that's the only way that we can build something that is really working.
I don't know whether the
people are here. Join us.
I don't know, Enol or Alessia, whether for the working groups you presented, there's any specific types of people that you're looking for or hoping you're hoping will still join.
No, we welcome people from any background, really, because we can see this from the point of view of the research infrastructures, from the point of view of the researcher, the point of view of the repository, and maybe also aggregators of the scholarly communication infrastructure, because the task that you would like to address is not a small thing in a silo. Is something that relates to the integration of services and collaboration between different types of stakeholders of the EOSC, basically. So really everyone is welcome. And it would be very important to have also researchers from different background and disciplines.
Okay, so on that note, everyone is welcome, and we're still very much looking for extra people to join this working groups that have just started. I think that's where we'll wrap up. Thanks everyone for joining. We'll be back in half an hour with our final session of the EOSC Future Open Days, which is on the Knowledge Hub and the training that we'll provide through EOSC Future. So I'm hoping to see many of you then again for our final session. If not, thanks for joining today.
Thank you very much, everybody, and have a good rest of the day.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.